Without supplies, there's no surgery. Without products, there's no patient care. Welcome to Power Supply, the healthcare supply chain podcast focused on helping you navigate the intricacies of logistics, purchasing, contracting, and supplier relationships. Each episode, we speak with healthcare executives, supply chain leaders, and innovative entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the loading dock to strategic sourcing, from buyers to the C-suite, and across the enterprise, we tackle the real-life issues impacting the healthcare supply chain. Whether you're tuning in for conversation or inspiration, we're glad you're here. You're just in time to hear it from the source and stock up on insight. So sit back and plug into Power Supply.
Welcome to the final episode of 2024 of the Power Supply podcast. Woo!
Game
on. It's been a great year, guys.
What a year. Amazing year.
We're going to do a little recap today. We're not going to have a guest. And quite frankly, it's interesting. The two of you both have day jobs, so to speak. And you always like to pick on me a little bit like, man, you know, what we get paid to do this podcast.
Woo! Man, big money, big money. I don't like to brag, but
squirreling it away for retirement.
That's right.
We make hundreds.
I got a t-shirt. I think
you got a t-shirt, right? But the two of you do have day jobs, and a lot of times, you know, that's the expertise that we're bringing onto the show. But I thought maybe we could just talk a little bit about what the two of you do and the importance and the impact that you have, and also some of the themes that you've seen. I mean, we've talked about a lot of different things this year on the podcast. I mean, resiliency continues to be a big topic, back order management, a lot of push on AI and how that can apply. And then obviously the normal sort of constraints, like how do we deal with workforce training, shortages, et cetera. These things are going to continue to be quite prevalent, but we've had a lot of great guests on this year. I'm looking forward to next year as well. I think we finished the year really strong with the guests in this last season, season 12. And so just wanted to kind of, you know, kick it off. And, you know, as you look back at 2024, we'll start with you, Garry. As you look back at 2024, like what really stands out for you this year? And was it the t-shirt?
Justin, the fact that it arrived in the mail, snail mail to Idaho was first of all impressive. That I opened up a box and thank you for the Power Supply polo. It's very nice.
Those horses finally delivered.
They did. I mean, no stoplights. It's hard to know where they're going half the time. You know, heading back to the corral. But yeah, no. You know, I'm really interested, more importantly, in what Hayes has to say, but my world has just been filling gaps. I mean, it's always about strategic sourcing, contracting, saving money, but I think that's the first step everybody talks about, but it's some downstream after that is, you know, what's utilization, what's labor optimization, what is, you know, specific engagements where we can be creative and save money. We've had a lot of issues where a lot of, you know, hospital districts to critical access hospitals to larger systems are operating very close in the red, and some are in the red, and they're always looking at ways to get this moving forward. And whether it's mergers and acquisitions or it's, you know, reduction in force, we hate to see that sometimes because it's so much change. So I think creativity.
That still confuses me, Garry, that whole workforce shortage to me. I know we brought it up on an episode this year, but we're hearing reduction in force and then there's not enough workers. And so over and over, I just wonder if the issue is more having experienced workers and having the training that's really in place to bring people up. And I know that's a reason we've had so many discussions around the utilization of AI is, you know, if we've got to reduce salaries, you know, how do we get the same kind of output from our supply chain department with less people? And at the same time, do you feel like you get brought in because there just isn't enough bandwidth to achieve those financial goals? And they're just, you know, there is reduction in force in certain areas, but at the same time, if you can save a certain amount of money and you've done it before and you've done it at other organizations, then they're pulling people in because they're not making a long-term commitment to help them with those things. Is that what's happening, or do you see it differently?
I think you're right. Demonstrating that ROI and having the experience to come in and be able to, it seems like there's roles that are positioned. You're going to do sourcing contracting. You're going to be the buyer. You're going to be the consignment inventory guru, and you're going to be CVA. But if you can tie all that together and walk that process that is efficient, I think you can fill a gap and support the ongoing mentoring knowledge of those individuals as you come in. But I do think it is that efficiency model of having multiple areas of expertise and not just being one position. This is your hire. This is all you're going to do for 25 years. You got to be able to pivot and morph like in supply chain, we all say. I'm more curious, seriously, Justin, to hear what Hayes hears of this, because he hears it at the high level. I mean,
well, I want to. I'll tee him
please.
up, but I got to riff on what you just said.
Yeah, I want to hear what you have to say, Gary. And by the way, can Gary tell me what Discover S3 really is?
Yeah, we're. You know what?
He's loaded the curveball at the end of the year. There's no holiday.
It is.
Yeah. So real quick, let me tee that up even a little bit better. We talked about day jobs. Gary's business or day job is Discover S3. And, Gary, you've taken that leap, from into kind of being self-employed, entrepreneurial. Obviously, you're in the consulting space, but to Hayes's point, maybe give us a little bit more of a background on what Discover S3 is, and then I'm going to bring it back to indirect spend, just kind of coming off of what you just said.
And that's fine. And thank you, Hayes. Thanks for the ask.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I'm happy to do it. It's just that's just what.
Don't worry, you're up next, Hayes.
No,
Hayes is so kind to me today. I'm waiting for like the fastball up and in. I'm waiting for it to come, but that's
it'll happen.
It's blessings, gratitude. Here we are. But no, call points are basically supply chain executives, VPs, and the CFOs. And legal. We work a lot with those individuals and really just maximize the opportunities on contracting all the way with the subject matter experts. Lived it, walked the floor, been on that side. I think Justin, Hayes, we all have been on that vendor side back in the day, and we want to support that agnostically and make sure we have great partnerships. So just filling the gaps is needed. And so coming in, walking in, we're like, we don't really have a resource to help this. What are your thoughts on it? In the supply chain world, we know there's lots of arenas to go down. So got a couple partners across the country, Jeff and Nate, who help support that. And we dive in anything to ERP, to consignment, to strategic sourcing, logistics, interim staffing, gain sharing. But yeah, whatever gap needs to be filled, we look at it and see if it meets our criteria and then support. Really implementing is our biggest deal, I guess. And I'll finish with that is, everybody develops a tagline, discover, solve, implement. But I think our 80-20, our Pareto principle is implement, because we really want to finish strong once the agreement's signed. Hence our Brian Bartel, you're only as good as the agreement, moving forward on that podcast. Is our implementation. We really want to be strong on that and really have the solution and deliver it. And so they see it on the back end. So
I was going to throw back to a couple of episodes, but that was one when you brought up implementation. I mean, that's why we talked about that, because I feel like if you've got bandwidth issues, implementation sometimes might not be ideal, but you don't need necessarily long-term resources on the team to be able to handle that. But the other thing is, you talked about, sort of specialty areas and specialization, and obviously with strategic sourcing becoming more and more sophisticated in its structure, that we're seeing some of that specialization. But I feel like indirect spend, that whole big category, sometimes gets given to like one strategic leader.
Yep.
And then there is just so much nuance across all of that. And we had several podcasts talking about some of those indirect spend areas like linen, et cetera. But we also had conversations about, sourcing and comparing benchmarks to other industries and seeing some players come into the market around that. So I think that was a really big theme for us this year. And that specialization piece, it's just very elusive for a lot of organizations. And when they can't add a lot of staff, then that makes it difficult to really tackle that. And so you're seeing the emergence of a lot of entities that are just helping augment including GPOs, consulting agencies, other companies that are coming in and really focusing on those areas. And I think that's going to be a continued trend, just the focus on, how can we attack 80% of the spend that we just typically haven't, had under standardized national agreements. All right, Hayes, your turn. I would love for you to talk. Now, I think there's a lot of people. I can see him getting uncomfortable. This is great. He's usually, just so everybody knows, Hayes is like the coolest cucumber always on these shows. So, but I can tell you also, it's very clear, Hayes, you don't love to talk about yourself, and we're going to make you do it here. I think there's a lot of great work that you're doing, and I'd be shocked if sometimes people get confused with the videos that you're doing for your business and power supply, that they see you as synonymous between the two. And a lot of our listeners are very, very active on social media, specifically LinkedIn. And so they see you there all the time. So I'd be shocked if they weren't already familiar with your work. But can you talk a little bit about what you do and the kinds of groups that you pull together throughout the year to have some really important strategic conversations?
I'll do my best. Yes, I will. Probably the easiest thing that of my tagline through the years, when people ask me, what do you do is that a cocktail party or whatever, particularly if they're not in healthcare, is I put smart people in small rooms and big things happen. And that's essentially what I do.
I love that.
Yeah, well, it's just as clear as I can get it. I have relationships with hospital CEOs, hospital supply chain, and hospital pharmacy leaders all across the country. We bring those executives together several times a year. We do 4 live meetings a year. And that's where I put, let's say, 5, 6, 7 hospital supply chain leaders, VP level, in a room with a company. And what happens is the companies, be it whoever, being multi-billion-dollar companies down to startups, have a chance to basically ask questions of the executives, of the providers. And that's where really cool things happen. I mean, companies change their strategies, they change their solutions, everything about them. I've had 2 companies through the years that actually changed their name when they walked out the room. And I just orchestrate all that. So, because I have relationships on both sides. So that's what I do. I put smart people together and really good things happen.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to put it. Smart people in a small room for big things. And honestly, that immediately makes me think of value analysis and sometimes how things get really bogged down because the teams are too big. I think it's really important what you said there is there's got to be enough room for everybody to have a voice and to be contributing to sort of that conversation. And I understand that, a lot of times you might be doing that with, a supplier organization, but you were just telling us before we got on the air here that you had a provider only meeting. And, I think it would be really great, because I realize that they're not just supply chain execs, there's CEOs as well. But what are some of the common themes that are coming up, that came up in your meeting as we're kind of heading into 2025 and looking forward to maybe some priorities for healthcare organizations? Like, what were some of the topics that came up as either continued conversations and continued focus with areas for growth, or maybe there's some topics that are a little bit newer that maybe we're now just getting on the radar?
In November, we host the Council of Supply Chain Executives. We had our 20th annual meeting. And
wow, congrats, though, real quick. 20 years?
Yes, 20 years. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
That is, they add up. And so,
you're not that old, Hayes. You're like, Hayes, you told me you're 33.
35, I lied.
Okay.
But yeah, at that meeting, that's where at one point we have, that's obviously our supply chain meeting. We'll have about 40 or so providers in a room only. No, none of the companies, no suppliers are there. And they basically get to talk about what's on their mind. What are their challenges? What are some things they're working on that are working? And one of the biggest challenges that it's probably 3 or 4 years running. It's just talent. Y'all mentioned it earlier. Just trying to find good quality people to bring into our wonderful industry, and they're having a hard time doing it and trying to find the next, leaders. And that was one of the biggest points of emphasis, is recruiting and retaining qualified staff. And that also leads into the remote workforce. The older guys always want to have everybody in the room, in the office, but they also understand, to get the most qualified person, he or she might live in Idaho, I mean, I don't know who else lives in Idaho, but literally it takes a national, workforce in order to find some of these specialty folks. And then that leads to the second question, which some have done really well, is how do you create a culture of teamwork and all those, the intangible things is when everybody's remote. Another focus for them, and the last thing, or not last thing, there are multiple things we talked about most recently, but those were the big ones. Bill only, that still comes up all the time. Consignment inventory. How do we manage that? They talked to a few companies around that have worked well for them. Obviously, one other thing was interesting that really kind of took off, which I never really thought much about it, is reducing software duplication. That was something that, these systems have bought too many licenses and those type of things, too many seats. And how do you go back and actually audit that? And that a lot of times, that sounds like an IT function. And that's what was kind of a discuss. They go, well, but that ultimately falls under, supply chain in many cases. So how do we go back and audit that? So, I mean, there are 1,000 topics that they came up with. But I mean, those are some of the hot topics, as well as automation. Several of them have done robotic process automation, RPA, which I didn't know much about in that context. But several of them have actually, I know one of them said they saved nearly 18 FTEs. I forgot how many, 20-something thousand hours they saved in 1 year, primarily in the sourcing side of the business. So yeah, it's
that could be a 7-figure spend, right? Pretty easily.
Oh, well, that no doubt.
Yeah.
And we didn't get enough detail on it. I'd love to find, if there's a company out there and experts that really know about this, I'd love to talk to them and find more about what does it cost to get started in that? Who are the leaders in this stuff, and how do you actually implement it, and how long does it take? Because I mean, obviously AI is taking over in virtually everything we do. And that is something that can literally save, I think, systems, perhaps millions of dollars. So, yeah, those are a few of the things.
Well, that's really great that I just want a quick plug. We are looking, for guests, at all times. Sometimes you may be getting an in-mail from me if I'm seeing you active or you recently connected with me on LinkedIn. So just to kind of put that plug out there, if you've got a success story at your healthcare organization that you want to tell on the show, but Hayes just kind of had a call out for somebody who can speak to that robotics topic. I know we'd really like to get somebody who has experience in food services. That's another topic that we'd like to have on. I know, Garry, you put a post out maybe a couple of months ago, maybe to talk about the impact of tariffs. If there's anybody that, and maybe it's not a supply chain person who's working in the hospital today that's listening to this, that might be the expert on that, but maybe they know somebody, maybe there's somebody on your team. I think it's really important to kind of, as we continue to curate content for our audience, for you to know that it doesn't necessarily have to be a supply chain professional that comes on the episode. It's just that the topic needs to be relevant and something that supply chain leaders would want to know about. And we've had actually guests that have come on and talked about risk management and supply chain's role in risk management. And so there are a lot, and we've had somebody from HFMA who was talking, a little bit more on that CFO level, but how they view supply chain. So, we're able to go really broad in our topic base and also really narrow it down. And so I want to encourage, for those that are listening, you can send an email to me, which is justin@powersupplymedia.com, or you can send us to the general email info box, info@powersupplymedia.com. If you have any guests, or just connect with us on LinkedIn and make suggestions around topics and guests that you'd like to hear on the show. Think big, but I will just put one last little caveat on here. We also like to get down into the weeds. We want the content to be applicable to all levels of experience. And so many times we have these high level strategic types of discussions, but then we really break it down and get into the nuance in a specific topic as well. And we'll continue to do that on these shows moving forward. Garry, what were you going to say? I know you were kind of responding to what. Hayes was talking
I
about.
tried to mute him. I couldn't mute him fast enough. Sorry.
You know what? There's Hayes. We're back on 2025. Here we go.
This ain't working. Good.
It is good. No, I was just thinking about Hayes' comment, putting smart people in the room, and I felt like I wouldn't be in that room. That's where I was going to start. But, so, I've tried to be in that room, but, I just got to earn the right to advance, and I will get there at some point in time, maybe 2030, maybe.
It's kind of like the grown-up table. You've got to just put your time in order to get there.
I know, and I long for that. My prayers at night always have Hayes in it, and that's where I want to get to. So, anyways, Hayes, no, seriously, all seriousness, I had a question, and I wanted, from your meetings, I wanted to ask you what you'd heard from the perspective of the, remote to now come back in the office to now hybrid models. I remember to coin the term from a very smart sisters of Carondelet told me I think it was the 10 and 5 walking down the halls. And when you would 10 feet, you would acknowledge somebody, 5 feet, you'd have a conversation. But I'm telling you, when I walked the halls, I learned so much. And just an engagement I just had, I walked the halls and was point A to point B on an engagement, and I learned so much in 3 days than the remote side. So I'm wondering where that's going. I wonder if it's a hybrid. Hayes, what are you hearing? I just wanted to get more input.
To your point, obviously, even outside of healthcare and the guys I talk to, most of the big companies are basically asking everybody to be in the office now, including, Elon's doing it. I think Amazon's going that way. A lot of those big companies are requesting that. And I think it's no different, but the guys that were kind of voicing their opinions about this, they prefer in-house. They want somebody in the office.
Yeah.
But it goes back to, I don't want to lose, Jenny, because she's got a 5-year-old that she's awesome, but she also needs, that flexibility some. And so it goes back to that. But you're right. I think those hallway conversations are what makes the dynamics of a workplace so important. And if you don't have it, I think you just lose it. And it's hard to do it over Teams. It's a great tool. They're all great tools. But being, face to face is ultimately, I think, the best way to go.
I almost feel like you need a process improvement position within the supply chain that's doing what you're talking about, Garry, and just going out and observing and fact finding and kind of managing some of those relationships to really see where the opportunities are. Because I think there is a lot of supply chain work, to your point, Hayes. Like, we don't want to lose, Susie, because she really needs the flexibility to be able to work from home. So maybe walking the halls isn't necessarily, a good fit for her, but there's tons of work after the fact that needs to be done. And there are plenty of people on the team who might need to hybrid or work fully remote that could do that work. But maybe you need somebody who's got, a little bit more of that interpersonal skill development, analytical skills, assessment skills that, I know of one health system that's very interesting. They assign a project manager to every department. And then that connects back to supply chain initiatives potentially. So they'll also work on that implementation piece that you talked about, Garry. But I have not seen a lot of healthcare systems have a fully developed project management team to support department and supply chain functions, either with new sourcing, implementation, or just general process improvement in the department, because that is a skill set of its own. And I think they move pretty quickly as a result of the structure that they have in place. And I also know the department leaders feel like, they're managing the day-to-day. So those bigger long-term projects, they've got a partner that's helping make sure that they don't fall off and lose momentum. So that's an interesting structure that I haven't seen very much. Hayes, you mentioned bill-only PO, so I'm going to plug a couple more things that we do at Power Supply that people might not be aware of. We obviously had several episodes talking in general around loaner consignment and bill-only POs this year. But for those of you that may not be aware, we have a Power Supply advisory group. It's provider only. We meet on a monthly basis for an hour, and we're always looking for other providers to kind of, join and be part of the group. One of the things that we've worked on is what we call Power Resources. So we created a bill-only PO kind of graphic that would talk through, kind of the general process so that conceptually when people come onto the team, they can kind of understand that and some of the nuances, but also keep it high level enough that it applies. And then we put out a monthly power supply advisory article. So when we meet for an hour, we have a specific topic that we'll talk about for 20 or 30 minutes. And then we take some quotes from the advisory team and put that out on social media and in our email newsletter. So just want to, call that out, that we're not just simply a podcast, that we do a lot of different things. And I also want to just give a huge thanks to ARM, because we have a rather strategic partnership with ARM that all of these episodes get approved for continuing education credit. So if you are somebody who is ARM certified with your CMRP and you need CECs on a regular basis, most of these episodes, because they're under 45 minutes, are worth 0.5 CECs. And then you just go online, take a 5-question quiz. And so if you listen every single year, just to put this into context, we have 32 episodes a year. That's 16 CECs. And if you do that over the 5-year certification term, you're going to get 80 of your required CECs just from listening to this podcast. So that is something that I just don't think we emphasize enough, because it can be so hard to get your continuing education credits, especially when they're webinar based and it's taking time, putting time on your calendar where you need to put your undivided attention, whereas you can listen to us on your commute, at the gym, whenever you want. And hopefully this is something Hayes has said from the beginning. Hopefully we entertain you, because supply chain may be sometimes a dry subject, and so this is how I want to wrap. The two of you have the craziest dynamic on here, and that's part of the entertainment.
Justin, I got a question for Justin.
Okay, do it.
Justin, when are you taking Hayes and I and Power Supply and Aaron on the road? When are we all going to meet in the same room and do a live at a conference, interview some people? I think we got a vision here, and I think it'd be really beneficial having Hayes there and you there, and then let me get about 5 days to get where we need to get, and I'll be there. But Justin, what are we doing?
You have to take a commuter plane, like you're like taking off from your house on the lake, then they
That's turbo. Hey, don't make fun of our turboprops. They are the worst rides in the history of the nation, but the turboprop will get you where you need, and then we go from there. So anyways, but hey.
Well, listen, first off, I'm at ARM every year, and I go to several other conferences like the IDN Summit, and I'll be going to even more this coming year. So if you guys want to meet up at a conference, or Hayes, you want some guest lecturers at your council meetings, certainly I think there are some opportunities for us to get together. But here's what's crazy. I mean, Hayes and I just met. It was this year, right, Hayes? Was it back in February, I think?
Yeah.
We've been doing this without ever having met. And we're going to be heading into our 4th year here in short order. How crazy is that?
Unbelievable.
And to see the transformation of Garry through the years. I mean, he had this long hair, beard, and now he's all clean shaven.
Oh my gosh, you're killing me, Hayes.
I think when I see him, I guess either the surgery, the shots, or the filters, or maybe a combination of all three have really changed your look.
Hayes, is it a problem? I have a picture of you that I'm trying to just look like. I mean, I try to get this unbelievable, the texture
Garry,
of your hair is amazing.
I get that a lot. And so
this is some of the magic. This is, to that point about keeping this show entertaining, like good. The dynamic between the two of you is that, and if the only way nobody's ever picked up on it is because this is their 2nd or 3rd episode. I think we have a lot of fun. I would say it took you guys about 3 years, but there was an episode, I want to say, not this season, but the season before, where you finally picked on me for the very first time. Like, you guys never pick on me, and then finally I took a pot shot or two.
Well, Garry called me, and he was concerned about your ego, that he didn't think you could take it. And so we said, all right, we'll be very easy and, kid gloves with Justin.
Sensitive.
Right, I'm going to call out the funniest. There was an episode very, very early on. You guys did tease me, just not on the air. But there was an episode very early on where I was talking about mentoring sales reps. And I think I said something like, I have mentored a lot of sales reps.
Oh, it was on.
It really hasn't been a lot. But Hayes, you picked up on that right away. And as soon as we were done recording, you were like, "Oh yeah, I'm Justin Poulin.
I'm the mentoree. I'm the mentor, dude."
Like, we have a lot of fun, guys. So you're right, Gary. We need to get the team.
Get on the road
together in person and
be fun
and have some fun.
In all seriousness, I think it'd be fun if we were at an event and we had a live area where we were interviewing our peeps, the peeps that we see that are part of supply chain, and pulled out some type of a podcast that Aaron can put together for us in the background as our wonderful, outstanding producer, and make something happen.
And he is good at that, by the way.
Aaron's the man behind the scenes.
Yep.
He can't actually join us in his producer role while we're recording this.
He's the guru.
He's the one that makes it all happen.
Worthwhile.
You actually have heard his voice if you listen to the show, because he's the one that does kind of the little audio break voiceovers when we transition from our intros to the guest joining the episode. So you've heard Aaron's voice, but you might not know who he is. And, it's a great time of year to be grateful for the people that help make all things go, and some acknowledgments. And so there's a guy that makes us all sound great that deserves a significant amount of acknowledgement. And I will say there are guests that will come on one of the podcasts and they've never been on a podcast before, and they'll say, I'm really nervous. I probably sound like horrible. And it's, as a guest, there's a common feeling at the end of an episode of, oh, I don't think I did very good, because we're all our own worst critics. And then they get the episode back and they're like, Aaron, you work magic. You made me sound great. And I want to make sure that the guests know that they're the reason they sound great, but Aaron's the one that makes it all sound so smooth.
I mean, he makes Gary sound with that whiny, that whiny voice he's got. He actually lowers it and makes it sound like almost pleasant to listen to.
How did I know this was coming? How did I dot the I's, cross the T's? This is a slam dunk. Thanks for setting that up, Justin, for Hayes to just come right in. Thanks.
That's what we do here. That's what we do here. By the way, Hayes wants you to talk more about your baseball career.
No, we're not. Do not.
All right, gentlemen, I want to tell you what a pleasure it's been working with you this year, all the years prior. I also want to just, out to all of you listeners, thank you for supporting the show. We've definitely been ranked several times as the top podcast in healthcare supply chain. There are people that came before us, like Bob Yokel, that who continues to do his podcast and the newsletters that he puts out every single month. Lots of supporters. I got to give a shout out to Brian Bartell, who does our email newsletter, has been a guest on this show, is actively involved in the Power Supply Advisory Group, and does the videos that you'll see shorts on LinkedIn. But if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see more long-form discussion with yet another huge supporter, Susie Collins, who has been a 3-time guest on the podcast and really makes a big push in social media to leverage it as a tool for knowledge sharing and education. So I want to just acknowledge, everybody. And I'm going to do one more acknowledgement. Chelsea also helps us a great deal. She does all the marketing for the Power Supply resources. So there's a big team working behind the scenes for T-shirts that does a great job with everything that we do here at Power Supply. T-shirts. And, you guys are my favorite.
T-shirts. Did you get anything?
Oh, I should have said polos. They're short sleeve polos.
Oh, nice.
Maybe we give them the T-shirts and you guys get the polos. So
I want a Justin Poulin bobblehead I can put on my dash. I'm rolling around. I think that'd be great.
I don't know. That might be too much, to be honest.
That might be too much.
Yeah,
we got to thank JP for his leadership. We got to thank Justin too. Appreciate all your direction, help, keeping it moving in the right direction, keeping Hayes and I on the same page too, and keeping it moving forward. I think you do a great job, Justin. Obviously, you were the key leader to get this moving in the right direction. So thank you, seriously.
Gary, but as I listened to Justin wrap it up there, it sounded like he was getting ready to fire us. I don't know. He's like,
that's true.
It's been a great 4 years. And
it's been great.
It's been wonderful. Thank you for your contribution.
And by the way, Aaron, stay on. Justin, Gary, please leave. Yeah, exactly.
Is there HR in here?
Yeah, wait a minute. Is this being recorded?
I'm concerned. Am I getting walked out of my own office? I feel like that's what's going to happen.
No kidding.
You're not fired, but we can't pay you anymore.
Jeez, double our salaries, please.
Yeah,
double our
so
salaries.
Hey, but if you're still listening, do us a favor, like these episodes and share them, because honestly, the more people know about us, the better guests we get on here, and the lot more money we make, of course. But more importantly, it helps our industry, and I think I'll think all three of us that are in here. We're huge advocates of healthcare supply chain and what it means, and we want to help everybody. So like, share, and tell everybody about us. We'd much appreciated.
Absolutely.
All right. Gentlemen, it's been a great 2024. Looking forward to 2025.
Oh, good. I'm glad you said that.
Everybody out there, happy holidays, happy new year. We'll see you back the very first Monday in February to start our next season and kick off 2025 of Power Supply. So, gentlemen, on behalf of all of us here at Power Supply, thank you for listening to this final edition, a wrap-up of 2024 of the Power Supply podcast.
Bam! In the can. Let's roll.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Power Supply. As a reminder, you can help support us by subscribing on your favorite podcast app or by downloading the smartphone app on your iPhone or Android. Simply search for Power Supply in the App Store or Google Play. The best thing about downloading the smartphone app is that you can access bonus content for certain episodes and view episodes in certain categories, like articles on the go and vendor spotlights. Are you following us on LinkedIn or Facebook yet? If you are and you love an episode or post, then let your social network know about it. Like, comment, or share our posts along with your thoughts and keep the conversation going. If you have any topics or guests that you would like to recommend for a future episode, just send us an email to info@powersupplymedia.net. We look forward to hearing from you.